Hi Maria.
Hello Violeta.
We are going to talk about the reintroduction of species in Spain.
First, what is the reintroduction of a species? It is a deliberate release of one species in an area in which it has disappeared with the purpose of establishing a self-sufficient and viable population. In the last years, it has increased by the growth of this kind of projects.
I'm going to talk about the principal institution for the reintroduction of species that are four. The first one is the IUCN, the International Union for the Natural Conservation. The second one is the State Commissions for the Natural Heritage and Biodiversity. The third one is the Natural Heritage and Biodiversity. And the last is the Natural Resources Management Plans. The judgment for the reintroduction of species. There are two. The first one is that the project should only be carried out when the original causes of the extinctions have been eliminated. And the second one is that the project should not be carried out if the disappearance was due to habitat alterations that did not have been corrected, or if there has been a significant deterioration of habitat since the extinction.
Now I'm going to talk about the stages of the reintroduction that is divided into 5 parts. The first one, the study of the viability. It is a previous analysis in which ecologist aspects are studied. For example, if the habitat is suitable. The second, the selection of specimens. There are 2 possibilities, maybe from the natural environment. So there must be certainty in the selection of populations, and from the captivity rearing, in which accuracy and coordination are fundamental. The third stage, preparatory one, it consists of the obtention of licenses and certificates for veterinary services, facilities, maintenance, and removal. The fourth one, freeing. The techniques depend on the characteristics of the species. And finally, monitoring. It is a fundamental part. It is the tracking of the animal during the adaptation period. Now we're going to talk about some specific cases of reintroduction of animals in Spain. For example, the Mediterranean monk seal, whose scientific name is Monatus monatus, and it was first quoted in Odyssey of Homer. In the past, it populated the coast of the east coast of Spain and the Mediterranean Sea, but the population was reduced until 2 individuals, and they finally disappeared. Nowadays, some recovery projects are being done in natural protected spaces in the Canary Islands.
My case is the Lamegier. The scientific name is Japaetus barbatus, that is that animal. And its name comes from the fact that the animal throws bones and shells from large heights in order to fragment and eat them easily, and they are typical from the Pyrenees and the Cantabrian mountains. But now they are in danger because of the injection of toxic substances and the electrocutation with cable installation.
This is a map of Poland. We carry out reintroduction and restitution in Poland. But what do those terms mean? Species reintroduction is the deliberate release of a species into the wild from captivity or other areas where the organism survives. Restitution is a process of returning endangered species or population to its natural environment. Peregrine falcons were very endangered of extinction in the half of the 20th century. Its number drastically decreased because of polluted DDT environment. Polish government created peregrine falcon restitution program. Restitutions were led by 6 centers in Poland. The main one was the breed center of peregrine falcons at the Agricultural Academy in Kraków. Thanks to the restitution, the population of the species increased by 345. Reintroduction of lynx was successful. In the early 90s, lynxes were introduced to the area of the Campinos forest after 200 years. From the Campinos forest, lynxes spread to nearby areas. In 2010 there were 300 lynxes in Poland, and before the reintroduction there were 100 of them. Actions to repopulate sturgeon in the Baltic are in progress. At the beginning of the 20th century, the population was so big that the government prohibited fishing sturgeons. Operations to restore this species in the Baltic are carried out for several years now. 60,000 sturgeons were introduced to the Baltic to this day. Sturgeons that are caught are tagged to let checking if the fish are growing, and the fishermen let them go. Fair restitution program started in 1996 in the Sudeten Mountains. 15 forestry managements with Dendrology Institute in Kurnik and Agricultural Academy in Poznań drawn up an inventory of places where fair occurs. They chose 1600 trees which are reproduced on plantations. The trees from plantations are planted in forests in the territory of Sudeten Mountains. In 1996, fair was 0.4% of all trees in Poland, and after several years it was 1.2%. In Polish mountains there are activities aimed at saving the largest Polish butterfly species since the 90s. Apollo in 1991 was estimated at about 20 to 30 individuals, which indicates that this population was on the edge of extinction. Thanks to the intensive efforts of specialists, we managed to recreate the population of Apollo butterflies in numbers, which allows us to be calm about the survival of the species. In Poland, after extinction of entire population of ground squirrel in 1970s, attempts were made to reintroduce the species. The main reason of extinction of ground squirrel in Poland was liquidation of large areas of pasture and fallow lands, as well as the fragmentation of the landscape and interruption of ecological corridors. For the place of reintroduction there was chosen the area where ground squirrel persisted the longest, and that is in Kamień Śląski Airport in the Opole region. According to data from 2012, in Poland there is around 770 active burrows. In Poland there are two species of migratory Salmonidae, Atlantic salmon and sea trout. They are displaced in the Pomeranian rivers and in the Odra and Vistula basin. The last salmon population in Poland, in Drava, died in the mid-1980s due to the destruction of spawning grounds. The spawning grounds were covered with sand for 5 years. The program has been successfully implemented in the last few years. Every year over 1 million summer salmon fry are allowed into the Polish rivers. In 2013, in the world, the amount of the species was 5,200 individuals. According to the data from 2013, there were 1,200 bisons in Poland, the majority of them in freedom populations. Almost half of the Polish free population is concentrated in the Białowieża forest. Restitution in Białowieża began in 1929 with the arrival of a male from the zoological garden in Berlin to increase biodiversity in Poland. Currently, restitution is carried out in Białowieża and in the Wolin National Park.
Anatolia has very rich fauna and flora. There are over 12,000 species of plants, 150 of mammals, 481 of birds, and 130 of reptiles. More than 3,000 plants are endemic to Turkey. Two of the three most important flyways between Europe, Asia, and Africa pass through Turkey. Also, Turkey is the only country in the world under the influence of three botanical geographical regions, and also the only country in the world subject to three main climates. Turkey's fauna includes 40,000 species. That's why we have to reintroduce and restitute this species to the nature. And here are some species that we restitute and reintroduce to the nature until today as a country. This is fallow deer. The first projects about protecting fallow deer started in 1966 in Düzlerçam. At the same year, it was determined 7 fallow deers were living in that area. After that determination, this area announced as a fallow deer protection area. After that, fallow deers which produced in their production area placed in Balıkesir, Muğla, and Adana provinces. Fallow deers increased in number. Then, the name changed as Fallow Deer and Wild Goat Protection Area in 1967. Because of the population increase of both genres, the area became a wildlife protection area in 1987. Results of researches, approximately 18,000 hectares is the potential living of quarter of fallow deers. This is Mediterranean monk seal. This species weren't protected until a few years ago in our country officially. After signing off some contracts, our government started to protect the areas they are living in and made a law about protecting the Mediterranean monk seal. Moreover, for protecting this species, we have international agreements. Turkey is under a strict control by lots of different international agreements and protocols agreed on to protect these endangered sea creatures and their coastal habitats. First significant study to protect Thermopsis turcica is Akşehir-Eber Lake Wetland Management Plan, which has been confirmed by International Wetland Council and brought into force. Thermopsis turcica's habitat has been protected by this plan. Also, Provincial Directorate of Environment and Forestry distributed brochure to the local to inform about the species. There is nearly 5,500 square meters protection area of this plant. There are barriers around it and water canals to carry water from the nearest lake. In 2008, scientists started some movements to protect and introduce Thermopsis turcica. For example, they gave us seminars about the importance of this species to biology, science, and social studies teachers in those areas. Rana holtzi is an endemic frog which is a member of Ranidae race. Their length can be between 6 and 8 centimeters and it's the only frog that doesn't croak. Their habitats are only Çinligöl, Karagöl and Eğrigöl in Balkar Mountains. Generally, their dorsal surface is satin yellow or black with green speckle. Also, their ventral can be yellowish or pink. Essential nutrients of Rana holtzi are generally insects living in meadow and arthropods. In 1990s, these frogs' generation entered into danger because in their breeding area, people lead to increase the number of carps unconsciously. Rana holtzi's habitats very narrow, so their generation can enter into danger easily. So we have to keep away their habitats from new roads and campers. In 1984, with Bern contract, Rana holtzi has taken under protection along with many creatures. Since 1999, these frogs are under protection by the Ministry of Agriculture and Affairs and international environmental organizations. Last year, NIDA Governorship's Environment Protection Council declared the Balkar Mountains as a special protected environment area. They forbid any activity that will disrupt the vegetation cover, geographical structure, or area's view.
Reintroduction is the release of species back into the wild. They came from captivity or moved from other areas where the species survives. It usually involves species that are endangered or extinct in the wild.
It is very hard to introduce EWE species into the wild, even if their natural habitats were fixed. The main reasons may be that the survival skills which are passed from parents to offsprings during parenting are lost. In other words, genetics of the species is saved, but the natural skills of the species is lost.
A habitat is an area that is populated by a particular species of animal, plant, or other type of organism. It is the natural environment in which an organism lives, or the physical environment that surrounds a population. If the habitat changes, it may be no longer suitable for animals and plants that live there. In fact, in this case, the species can disappear. Most animals live in one type of environment because they are best suited to it. We say they are adapted to this environment. For example, animals such as frogs, newts and ducks have webbed feet to help them swimming in the water. There are many different types of habitats and many different kinds of adaptation to fit into each. Because of the complex links between the plants and the animals, this can have many different effects. Climate change is making some habitats warmer, and so many animal species are moving to colder areas. However, some species are not able to move and the population are getting smaller.
As animals adapt to the places they live, so do plants. Plants are adapted to the wide variety of habitats. As a result, each plant has certain characteristics. Plants that grow on land usually have stiff stems to hold them upright, while water plants tend to have less rigid stems because the water supports them. Plants that live in dry climates like the desert have few or no leaves. Many, including cacti, store water when rain occurs. Their adaptation saves water. Plants that grow in shaded areas have large leaves to capture as much sunlight as possible, or they climb towards the light.
In situ searching for restoration involves removing individuals from an extincting wild population and moving them to the new site where they were formerly extirped, in order to ensure that their introduced population have the best chance of surviving. They are generally searched from nearby population with the similar habitat to their introduction site, will maximize the chance that reintroduced individuals will be similar to their original population.
In situations where in situ collection of individuals is not possible, for instance too few individuals existing in the wild, ex situ collections may be used. There are a number of types of ex situ collections. Germplasm may be stored in the form of seed banks, sperm and egg banks for preservation and tissue culture. This method allows the storage of many individuals and have high potential for reintroduction. Since this method allows for storage of a high number of individuals, it maximizes genetic diversity. Once collected, the material can last for relatively long periods in storage.
I go to nature to be soothed and healed, and to have my senses put in order.
The European bison, Bison bonassus, the continent's largest wild land mammal, once roamed across Europe. It was severely hunted until it finally became extinct in the wild in 1927. By then, only 54 individuals remained, all in captivity. A slow but successful breeding and reintroduction effort in Central and Eastern Europe helped establish a wild population again. The global population of European bison is now said to be 5,553. Of these, only some 3,230 live in free herds and 402 in semi-free herds. The European bison is a charismatic animal with a long-standing heritage in Romanian history and culture and is loved by the public. For restoring European ecosystems, it is important to bring back this symbolic animal, as it is a key species for rewilding and preserving wilderness strongholds. The bison's grazing and browsing ability helps maintain a mosaic of forest areas and grasslands and creates more variation and structure in the landscape. It is a species that will help maintain the ecological corridors across the entire Carpathian mountain range and enable natural processes to occur. The bison disappeared from the Romanian fauna 3 centuries ago, being reintroduced in 1958 when a pair of bison was brought from Poland to Hatzek Forest Park. Other animals were then imported from Poland, Czechoslovakia and Russia, according to Romsilva, a Romanian state-owned forestry company. The initiative of reintroduction of European bison in the eastern part of Romania is implemented by the Vânător Neamț Nature Park Administration. The scope is the improvement of the status of the European bison species through establishing a viable bison herd in this part of the Romanian Carpathians. But the reintroduction of Europe's largest land mammal represents one of the challenging tasks in the conservation of biodiversity. With respect to bison conservation, the first results for Romania have been achieved since 2005. quarantine farm for European bison, first tranquilizations, genetic tests, first bison imports on genetic basis from Western Europe, training for the staff involved, and the establishment of a bison management center. On the 22nd of March 2012, the first release of the bison from our country took place in an area which administratively belongs to Crăcăuani Commune, Neamț County. It is an isolated region, a 5,000 hectare pond, an area of deciduous and mixture forests at an altitude between 800 and 1,000 meters, optimal in terms of the existence of the bison in wilderness. Each of the 5 specimens of bison had a Telonics radio station mounted around its neck to be monitored using radio telemetry. By June 2012, a series of preliminary data had been obtained on how to use habitats and how to travel the territory. Thus, the bison gradually expanded their area of freedom using a surface of 1,000 hectares in areas with strong regeneration and deciduous and mixture forests. After the release, a new phase of this ambitious reintroduction pilot program was carried out, the monitoring of the released copies, also assessing the need for new releases in the Chitele area, as well as the identification of new optimal areas for introduction in the Romanian Carpathians, and finally the measure of the success or failure of this program. The 5 specimens selected to be released in 2013 were adult specimens aged between 7 and 12 years. In the spring of 2017, 4 bison, namely 2 male and 2 female, were released in the Vânător Neamț Natural Park. The bison, which were aged between 2 and 8, were moved to a special place for accommodation. Afterwards, Rom Silva specialists released them in the natural park. Following this action, a total of 29 bison are now roaming free in the Vânător Neamț Natural Park, being monitored by Rom Silva specialists. Rom Silva manages 3 important groups of bison in Bukșan-Dâmbovița County, Hațeg-Hunedoara County, and Vânător Neamț Natural Park. In total, the state-owned company monitors 96 bison. Since 2013, Rewilding Europe and WWF Romania have been working together in the Southern Carpathians rewilding area to reintroduce the European bison back to the wilderness. The first 2 releases took place in 2014 and 2015 in cooperation with the local municipality and the local communities of Armeniș and Feneș, the villages near the rewilding site. In 2016, another herd entered the adjacent rewilding zone of 150 hectares before joining the other bison that are already roaming free. This third herd consisted of bison originating from different European zoos and wildlife centers. The goal of Rewilding Europe and WWF Romania within the Live Bison project, financed by the European Commission through the LIFE program, is to create a free-roaming viable population of at least 193 bison by 2020 to further grow to an estimated 300 in 2024. Bringing back the bison will be a substantial contribution to its conservation in Europe, as laid out in the IUCN Species Action Plan for the European bison. The rewilding is also part of a large initiative in Romania, where Rewilding Europe and WWF Romania work together to create one of the largest contiguous wild areas in Europe. 3 million hectares connecting various protected areas, core wilderness areas, and rewilding zones across the larger southwestern Carpathian mountain range. This area consists of 6 different Natura 2000 sites, and it is here where the European bison will be able to play its important ecological role in its natural habitats. The intention regarding the European bison reintroduction is not only to re-establish a keystone species in the ecological sense, but also in a spiritual and cultural sense, being convinced that emphasizing the cultural and spiritual accents of an endangered species represent a necessary step in our attempt to protect the wildlife.